Really pleased this morning to be joined by Johnny Morris. Johnny, thank you ever so much for giving up your time to have a chat with me this morning.
You're welcome.
So Johnny and I have known each other for a number of years, and to give a bit of a context for anyone who is listening, so senior marketing leader, you've done loads of big roles in what I say kind of complex change and transformation programs. You've worked a lot within fashion and luxury retail, so that's very much kind of sectors of expertise, and you've worked all over the world. So you've done a load in EMEA and a lot of time out in Asia as well. And we'll talk as we kind of get into it, because I'm really keen to hear more about your most recent role, which was with Neom in Saudi Arabia. So that's absolutely fascinating. So it's going to be a fabulous year ahead for you. And I know that one of your exciting plans this year is that in addition to your day job, you're going to be studying in your free time for your PhD in AI and ethics, which is amazing. You're doing that at Henley Business School, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Looking forward to that. Try and squeeze it in around the day job.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk more about that as we get into things. But Johnny, thank you very, very much. And if it's all right with you, we'll dive straight into the questions.
Sure, let's do it.
Brilliant. So really interested if you can give a bit of a context about your career journey. So, kind of what's led you to some of these incredible destinations, experiences, brands that you've worked for. Are you able to give us a bit of an insight into your career journey?
Sure, absolutely, Susie. So back on the sort of second page of my CV is that I had about 20 years of startup experience. So I sort of did it upside down compared to most people, where I applied my 20 years of building and selling businesses, and I applied that to my corporate career rather than having a career that's in the corporate world and then trying to see how I could apply that to startups, which I think most people do. And my last business was a data-centric marketing agency. So I was London-based. I had fashion, luxury clients, and I was approached by an entrepreneur in the Middle East. And he operated a lot of different retail businesses. He was a franchise partner for Starbucks, H&M, Harvey Nichols, and so on. And he said he was spending too much on marketing and barely anything on digital marketing, and he felt like he was missing a trick. So I ended up moving my family to Kuwait, and in 4 years, I built an internal agency for him. So very data focused, very digitally focused, and I did that for him. And then I ended up moving from that corporate role, if you like. That was my first corporate role. And then I moved to be chief marketing officer for Robinson's department stores in Thailand. My family didn't come with me; they stayed in the UK, and I sat on the executive team for Central Group, which is $12 billion business. They had 10 different billion-dollar retail brands. And my role there was really to help them understand how to get closer to their customer, because they, at some point, they interacted with almost everyone in Thailand and most people in Southeast Asia. So really what I was doing for them is helping them to just try and get closer to that customer through data, through social media, and so on. And then finally in Thailand, I worked for a fashion retailer. I was group marketing director there, and they wanted to help engineer and bring some new life into an in-house luxury brand they had. So they said, how can we work with digital? How can we work with influencers? What's the impact of paying for Hollywood stars as ambassadors for our brands? Should we spend millions of dollars on that? And so I did. So I did spend some incredible time with them and work with some amazing people from Hollywood and also Asia as well then. So I guess that's my career so far, up until this project I've been working on in Neom.
Yeah, and so the Neom one, I'm fascinated about this. So your experience in Neom must have been extraordinary. What do you what did it involve? What can you share with us about what you were doing for Neom?
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible experience. Above all, I think that's something I never forget. When I was told that they had this incredible vision to reset the way that we consume the planet's resources, the way we, and rethinking the way we live, the way we work, it just seemed like an incredible project to work on. And so they flew me to this desert region of Saudi Arabia, and there's actually a really talented marketing team that's based there in the desert. I think in total there's about 5,000 people. There's probably a few hundred marketers. And what they're doing is they're bringing this bold vision to the world. And I'm obviously under a strict NDA of what I was working on there. But I mean, what I can share with you is they were saying, well, we've got this bold ambition. How do we bring it to the world? How do we tell that story to a global audience? Who's going to be interested in it? And it's $1 trillion project. It's going to have to generate some revenue. Where's that revenue going to come from? And what's that experience of bringing customers on board? So it was a fantastic project. I mean, I guess one of the most interesting things was saying, this is how a high net worth consumer makes a big ticket purchase. So
Yes.
what's that journey look like? And I guess the interesting thing that now is, what's a high net worth consumer look like today? Because you can easily draw on a typical model, but I think it's very different now. So their journey with a brand and their decision-making process is totally different now to maybe what it was 5 years ago.
Incredible vision that they've got. I'm excited to
Yeah.
sort of follow that as it moves along. And you mentioned some of the roles that you've done there, and I know that you've had sizable teams. There've been very much change and transformation programs, and thoroughly exciting. How do you, and it's one of your key kind of superpowers is leading
Mm.
teams, but how do you, it'd be interesting to share with people, how do you lead teams through these kind of change and transformation projects? What are your tips?
Well, maybe I'm a bit embarrassed to say now, but I'm a big fan of the 8 steps change model from Kotter, and I didn't realize that I was using it until I studied my executive MBA. So it was just something I was doing naturally through experience, through my startups. I realized that this was the way to manage change. Um, and but actually, in the executive MBA, I was introduced to this model, and I think it's a great framework to sort of articulate what I do. So this whole idea of building a sense of urgency um, it is really at the forefront, and then to develop this vision, almost in an evangelical style, if you like, develop a vision that people can believe in. And then that gives you that chance to get the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, but really excited and on board with your change project. Um, I always try and build a team from across the business. So rather than just being from a marketing silo, if you can borrow some people from across the various different areas of the business, that really helps manage that change. Particularly thinking about areas like finance for proving impact, and IT for managing all the complex technical infrastructure, and that sort of thing. Um, and then I think short-term wins are quite important. So in Central Group, I was showing them that actually the way to think about brand comms is maybe we structure them into lifestyle segments. So let's think of parents with children, with young children, or let's think of healthy living as a lifestyle segment. So rather than just talking about our brands constantly, shop at this department store, buy from this electronics retailer, go to this sports retailer. We were clustering our comms into these different lifestyle segments. And early on, I developed some campaigns that generated a few $1 million every time we broadcast them. And so that got the whole business and the board really awake to thinking about what's possible. And so yeah, those short-term wins I think are quite important.
Some really good tips there. And, some of these transformation programs that we get asked to help with, support with from a recruitment point of view, some of them are quite long, sort of typically 3, 4, or 5 years, but we have had them recently. They've been 7 or 8 years. And as you're going through these, you've got your vision that you explain, so everyone kind of buys into that emotionally. How do you keep your teams sort of, how do you keep the energy up? How do you kind of keep that momentum or morale, or however you want to phrase it, that kind of keeps the energy going through the duration of these programs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's really down to just that personal relationship. I think in many of these teams, there's a sort of multicultural
Yeah.
aspect, and that's what's been so exciting about my career. Where when you get to understand those individuals, you can sort of understand where their superpowers are. And I think sitting back a little, stepping back, and letting some of the junior members of the team perform, where you're giving them that freedom to progress things that perhaps they've never progressed before, but you're there to catch them just in the sidelines, just in case something does go wrong. And I think that's something that I'm quite keen to do. I've always been interested in developing the next generation of marketers. So I think a lot of the time I've been delivering workshops for them while I've been in some of these roles, having sort of coffee conversations and doing things like personal branding, sort of support and things like that. How do you build your own brand in these massive, massive organizations of more than 100,000 people? How is anyone going to find you? How is anyone going to know that you exist? And what's a natural way to do that? That sort of will come naturally to you because it relates to some of your core strengths.
To be your authentic self is your.
Yes, yeah, yeah, great.
Oh, that's a super answer. I love that one, Johnny. And I want to talk a bit more now, because you mentioned that you're going to be doing your PhD in AI, and I know that you've always been, your character is kind of continuous learning and development. You've done your MBA, so this would be a PhD in AI and ethics, which is fascinating. So, what are you able to share with us about? What does this involve, and what's attracted you to doing this PhD?
Well, it really wasn't planned. It was I was catching up with some of the marketing academics at Henley Business School, which is where I did my executive MBA, and they had asked me to talk to some of the future cohort and those people that were just thinking or just about to start an MBA, and they're asking me like what was my experience, what was my approach to it, and so on. And so we were having this chat, and I was in quite a reflective mood. And we were sort of talking about how I'd used AI a little bit at Neon to understand their audience better. And we were talking about Neon's approach. And we were thinking about sustainability came up and questions about consumerism as well. And sort of thinking about those philosophical concepts. And so we ended up in this sort of conversation about when you use proven psychological techniques to influence sort of addictive behaviors in consumers, when's the point, especially with AI, when's that point that you should start putting your hand up and saying to the audience, we're using these techniques to persuade you to buy this product? And also along the similar lines, when do you get to that point where you start saying to customers, you don't really need this product? So we're selling you something, but just be aware this is not something that you need. And so we ended up in this conversation about how AI hasn't really been fully explored by the marketing industry yet. And they just suddenly said, well, in this conversation, they said, if you wanted to explore this in more depth and do some more research into this topic and involve the marketing community in this, then we'll support you, and it would make for an interesting PhD.
Oh, congratulations. That's really exciting. You must keep us updated in terms of your progress and obviously your research and ultimately your findings. So I love that's kind of come about because it's something that's a passion and interest of yours. And oh, going to be some groundbreaking research there, Johnny. I think that sounds
Let's
great.
hope so.
Um, we talk about giving advice on these kind of Q&A sessions as well, because a lot of the a large part of the audience listening to these will be maybe sort of heads of or directors of looking at you wondering how do I get to that point. So any advice that you would share with people who are in a position where they're now starting to set their sights on a senior leadership role?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been mentoring some marketers, sort of some marketing directors looking to move forward in their career and to make the next step. I've been mentoring them with the Chartered Institute of Marketing. And what I often say to them is that there's not always one path. So don't be afraid to sort of step sideways. If there is a role somewhere in the organization that interests you, then don't be afraid to make that sideways step, because I think today that these big conglomerates, like the ones I've been working for, are looking for sort of rounded, broader experience in senior leadership. So they don't really mind what sort of vertical you're in. And so rather than picking people that have spent their entire life in one swim lane, they're really looking for that sort of broader, rounded commercial experience. And I think you can see that when you look at how the senior leadership titles are changing in organizations, and how I think marketing roles are becoming marketing and something else. So marketing and sales, marketing and revenue, commercial, and so on. So I really think that would be my one piece of advice is don't just think that there's one path. That there are some really interesting, exciting ones that you could follow as well.
I would agree, and I like your comment about sort of finance and getting it more commercial experience, and other leaders that we've had on here have sort of echoed that sentiment in terms of really gain a wider understanding of how the business operates, particularly the commercial and financial side of things as well. So you're right, there's not, there are lots of different routes to the same end goal. Finally, we talk about the importance of positivity and resilient mindset with all of our guests. And I think that's probably especially important, as we've mentioned, in terms of kind of change and transformation programs. They can be pretty tough. How do you maintain a positive mindset? Have you got any really good rituals or habits that you would like to share that may benefit others?
Sure. I mean, I think it sort of comes naturally after 20 years of building startups and building your own businesses. Then you have to have a positive mindset, otherwise it's not going to work. And resilience is something that becomes your superpower, perhaps. Every time you start a new business, you just need that, and you need that positivity. So I think that comes naturally. And I think if you try and find a way that you can distill that and give it as advice, um, I quite like this concept of ladders of inference. So where you sort of you get some limited data, and people start building conclusions off that limited data. And so they have a piece of information, and then a whole discussion, and then a plan, an action plan follows from very little bit of information. And I think that a great example of that is when I was working with Starbucks, and in Russia, we just refurbished a store in Moscow. and we just turned it into this whole industrial designed store. It was very, very cool. It was in the middle of the sort of luxury retail district in Moscow, but they lost after they reopened, they lost 30% of their customers. And so there was this conclusion in the business. The customers just didn't like this whole cool industrial design. And they had just, and Starbucks had assumed that just simply off that fact that 30% of the customers had disappeared after the store reopening. So we spoke to them. And we started speaking to customers, and every time a customer walked into the store, we asked them, and then we contacted those customers who we hadn't seen. And there was a really simple reason of why we weren't seeing as many customers. In fact, there were two. The first one is that the parking regulations had changed outside the store. So you couldn't just stop and pick up a coffee, which is what everyone was doing before.
Yeah.
And then the other one is that we had forgotten to tell people that the store had reopened. So
Ah,
it was just so simple, and they were just saying, "Oh, that we'll come, we'll come and visit." And I think this whole idea of ladders of inference you see everywhere, where you've got that limited piece of data. And I would say just be careful about drawing conclusions on something because you're probably wrong.
very good advice. Johnny, thank you. You've given some amazing answers. I wish you the very best for the year ahead and for your PhD. I'm very excited for you about
Thank
that.
you.
And thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Susie.